G Talk, where the G stands for God. This is Minister Coates, and we have a special guest with us today, Mr. Audre Jenkins. Mr. Audre Jenkins, we'd just like to thank you for just coming on the show, and we'd like to thank you for just giving us a little bit of your time.
Sure. Honored to have this opportunity, and this is truly a great opportunity to share, as you guys invited me over, a little bit about what I do in the community as a local funeral director and embalmer. Again, as you said, my name is Audre Jenkins, and hail from the big city of Harrison, Georgia. Goes a little deep into Washington County. Sandersville is the county seat, which is where I spent the majority of my life, as an adult and growing up or what have you. But definitely being here in Milledgeville as a servant the last 8 years at Slater's is who I am. So a few more things about me, if I may. I'm the chairman of our Georgia Funeral Service Practitioners Association. So current chairman of the board. So my tenure in funeral service runs pretty deep here in Georgia. Last 25 years I've been a servant of this profession. Had the honor to serve several funeral homes here in Middle Georgia, and currently owner and operator at Slater's. Honored to be God's person.
I've heard a lot about your influence, your faith and success in the funeral home business. But can you give us a little background about how you got into this business altogether?
All right, so in the year 2000, my father, who's now deceased, was a deacon at Harrison Springs, and he was great friends with Marvin Harris, who's a funeral director over in Sandersville. And Marvin was looking at the time for some attendants to help with driving and that kind of thing on funerals, making removals, which is, some funeral home duties, if you will. And my dad, who was just starting to think about retirement, said the funeral home was the last thing was going to be on his mind as related to retiring. And so, but I was in earshot of the conversation that he was having with my uncle, and was like, "Hey, Daddy, that's something I wouldn't mind doing if you really need some help." Because at the time, I was helping my father in his side hustle, cutting grass, laying blocks, that kind of thing. And so, shortly thereafter, a conversation between my father and Mr. Harris afforded me the opportunity to begin my tenure at MC Smith Funeral Home in Sandersville. That's my place of humble beginnings. I'm serving under Mrs. Katie Smith Poole, who is truly a dynamic woman of influence in her community, a true statesman in the funeral profession, understood what it was to serve people and to give it her all. And she exemplified that every day on purpose, serving people. She did it all the time. So having that as a introduction into the profession, I realized that in my intro to it, helping the elderly ladies across the street, at that time the parking lot at MC Smith was always across the street, and having to go out and assist people in, and the ability to serve, to tangibly put my hands on service was fulfilling to me. And I realized that I enjoyed doing what I was doing. The clinical part of it, from the embalming and preparation of the deceased, always was a bit of an interest as well after my first introduction. And learning the art of it, was also part of, hey, how can you perfect what is known as the sanitation preservation of human remains? So that part was, always curious to me, and being a perfectionist by nature, and wanting to be sure that you properly serve the people and meet the needs that they had. It's just one of those things that goes along hand in hand with serving. You want to perfect and make sure you're the best servant that you can be in fulfilling those particular roles. But that's how I got started, and worked there for 16 years, and then started a trade position where I worked for several funeral homes, which was my first introduction to Milledgeville. The Davis family, Mrs. Geneva Davis and her family, who operated Peoples at the time, was my first intro to Milledgeville. I was able to come over as a contractor with them during the year 2007. And so that was my first introduction to Milledgeville, working along with Mr. Oscar Davis Jr., Ms. Mae West, Mr. Deacon Davis, Rodell, and the gang there at Peoples many years ago. Was a true and very welcoming introduction to Milledgeville, and I enjoyed it. I really did. And so having the opportunity to come over now kind of tells the story of how God placed me here. But it's truly amazing to be here and to serve people. Yep.
So what inspired you to, start your own or go into business, owning a funeral home?
The inspiration of owning my own funeral home was not there. Owning truly, for me, was truly a calling. I mean, my life is centered around my faith in Jesus Christ and my communication with Him. So being very prayerful and mindful of things that we do on a day-to-day basis has always been key to me. I was taught that by my grandparents, and thank God for that introduction from them. But living and serving people on purpose, you realize where your strength lies. And I can remember in my early years of being a licensed director and meeting with families, you have the need to give sometimes. And what I mean by give, not always financially, but you have to find how you can best serve a person based upon the decisions that you make as the person who's, for lack of better words, in charge of that moment. So I can remember needing to make some decisions as an employee that I really didn't have the authority to do. And that yearning of not being able to fulfill the call caused me to realize, hey, you got to do this for yourself. Not because you want to be in competition of the people who trained you, but I knew that I had outgrown the ranks of where I was. I understood that my job was to make my current employer, at that time it was MC Smith, Mrs. Poole, and Mr. Marvin Harris, who's still there running the company. My job was to make their organization look good. And I actually learned that from Mr. Harris's sister-in-law, Minister Eartha Cummings, preached a message some time ago about making your boss look good. And oh my, when she did that, it allowed me to really think about the importance of how well we should serve in the capacity that we're currently in. And when you perfect being a servant, you understand best how a leader needs to be in operation. And I think that really catapulted me forward to understand that it was my time to move from that level into leadership. And a young lady, Desi Hall, who's slightly older than I, but the Lord spoke to her and told her to sow a seed into my life. It was $150. She said, hey, we're supposed to sow up. I know that you don't need this money per se, but if you're going to sow money, you should sow it into good ground sometimes, and to someone who's not necessarily in need, but just to say, hey, God, this is where I want to go. Desi gave me $150, and she said that the Lord had told her that that I needed to own my own funeral home. So that was kind of confirmation of something that the Lord was dealing with me about. And I started to pray about it, started to look at buildings, and just simply trying to figure out what I needed to do. Professionally, I looked out to intermediaries and people who were in the business as relates to acquisitions and things of that sort. And I had a mutual friend of mine, came here to Milledgeville to a district meeting. Again, as I said, I'm chairman of the board now, but during that time I had just been appointed, I was elected. I ran for office, third vice president of our state organization. And we had a district meeting here in Milledgeville, and my topic that I was speaking on that evening was bringing the best out of your worst employee. And Mr. Griffin was in the room, and those who know Mr. Griffin knows that he can be a little terse sometimes. He's military. He's a retired colonel in the Air Force, and he was very terse, and he didn't look as though he was enjoying the meeting. And I was giving it my all. And the Lord spoke to me during that moment, and He said, "Hey, don't lose focus. Don't become weary. You'll be asking that man about buying his business." And just like that, standing at what is now, I think it's Jackson's, but it's the restaurant out at the lake. That's where we were assembled. And so that was when the Lord spoke about Slater's initially. Immediately on my way home, called my intermediary and said, "Hey, I think I need to meet with Slater's Funeral Home here in Milledgeville, Georgia, just to see really what he." I said Floyd Griffin, but immediately my intermediary said 244 North Wayne Street, Milledgeville, Georgia, Floyd Griffin. So this is someone who's calling from the other. I call from the other side of the world, who really knows nothing about Middle Georgia. So obviously there was a tie that bind that Mr. Griffin had seen me as a possible person that he would like to take on his business. And little and completely unbeknown to me, I did have no clue at all. So when I reached out to this other professional, it was nothing but God confirming that he had Slater's, for lack of better words, for me. And I remember calling Mr. Griffin at the next morning, wanting, the desire to meet with him. And he told me about his thought years prior. And he said, "And I asked you if you would be willing to come to Milledgeville and work. And you told me no." And I did. Because I didn't feel as though I needed to cross the river to do the same thing as an employee. I just felt like that, I'm loyal, so that's why I didn't. And in that time, that conversation that morning, it was, nothing promising that I would have the opportunity. Right, but as I was saying though, ultimately when I was leaving the room, Mr. Griffin asked me, the challenge of running and operating such an institution as Slater's, was I prepared to handle that particular opportunity? And I explained to him the same God that gave me that led me to that seat that morning, that would even start this conversation, would be the same God that I would depend on in running running this organization and the opportunity that he would possibly present to me. I knew what I was called to do, and I knew why I was being afforded that opportunity. Before that year was out, 3 banks had offered me the finances to buy the funeral home. It was through my intermediary, who I had to seek counsel. How do I buy a business of this magnitude? Again, I was the owner of a small real estate business. Family had a farm over the years. My mother's maternal side of the family has some property out in Riddleville that so management of a small farm operation as an owner, and Integrity Management Group, which is a real estate investment group, was a small tax lien property group that my friends and I had, and we were successful at that. So running a business, I had very little experience, but a public servant and serving the community will have become a lifestyle. So the servanthood part of Slater's was very easy for me to transition into. Running a business of that magnitude was difficult. That was challenging. But that's how I got here. The Lord's will, His hand upon it, and still depending on Him. That's it.
So you spoke briefly about some of the challenges that you had when you first got in the early years. Can you speak briefly about those and how you kind of overcame some of those challenges that you faced?
Sure. One of the biggest challenges that I faced in taking on Slater's was the heart of the servant and the ability to collect finances. In the African American community, we have not, and in some ways, we have not been educated enough and taught the importance of the dollar within our community. And so when it comes to particular needs that we have, we are not financially prepared to handle the need. And the mortuary side of things, burying our loved ones, taking care of their final moments, sometimes hit us unaware. Trying to run a major institution and facing the financial challenges of families who may not have had the funds, I really, for a while at Slater's, it was a huge challenge because you're trying to run a huge business in Middle Georgia that you expect state of the art, brick and mortar. You want a nice building. We expect nice Cadillacs to ride down the road in. Those kind of things were expectations. However, to fund that with a very small cash flow was difficult because that was one of the major challenges that I faced as a young business owner, and developing the heart of a servant. I had to learn how to say no and to how to make sure that we built an institution that was purposeful and dutiful about what it was called to do. Being a good steward over God's money. When people pay their bill and they take care of their loved ones, we as an institution in this community should reinvest our monies the way that it should be, the way that God holds us accountable. And that is through the investment into your employees, that is through the investment of the brick and mortar to make sure that families have a place to take their loved ones, to make sure that it looks well. And all of those things are very important. And in order to make those things there, to have a ministry that will be there for tomorrow, you got to collect money. That was one of the major challenges that I faced early on. This is a hub of Central State employees, which is a system where it's a huge honor system because those families, they get the money put in their hand. It doesn't come to the funeral home. And so building relationships during those arrangement conferences that built trust so that when a person received the funds, weeks and months later when the death is no longer affecting them, emotionally, it's less effective after the funeral is over and the healing process has started. And then you dump, $20,000 into someone's hand to give away half of it to the funeral home. It's easy. So that, we face those challenges. And now we've had to implement so many different, ways to make sure that we're here and for tomorrow. So that was probably the most challenging part, is the collection process. The heart of the servant, meshing with people, understanding that when you love people, people will love you back. Hadn't, met everybody as, being a friend of mine, but I have had a warm welcome to Baldwin in Middle Georgia. I have, and I have built some beautiful relationships with some very, 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 very friendly families here. The Lord has afforded me that opportunity, and I love it.
You spoke a lot about serving the people, serving the community. What's the most rewarding part of your work?
The most rewarding part of my work is when I can see a family. In small towns, the most rewarding part of my work is when a funeral has taken place and it's weeks or months or years after, and I see the person in the general public, and I don't remind them of their death, but I remind them that I was there for them in one of the worst times of their lives. They remember me as a person who helped them instead of reminding them that my daddy died. I want to be remembered as a guy who, he helped me. And it's not about what I did, it's about the way I made them feel. Ultimately, when you serve people, when you give people your all, people will know, they'll get to see your heart. They'll know who you are. And that's proven to be successful. And I love to be able to see my families later on, whomever it is, and they don't remember the fact, I don't remind them that such and such died in February. They remember, that's Andre, he was all right with me. Right. So that's what's rewarding for me, is to see a family who's moved forward in a positive light.
Right. Dealing with people is always tough, especially when finances get involved. Has your faith ever been really tested during your time in this business?
It has been. It has been tested, and of course, even Jesus said, "Who do men say that I am?" He asked that question, and, in the garden, and ultimately, some said it was this person, some said it was that. And from time to time, I have to make sure that I stay connected to my community by assessing, and we do that through surveys and different things of that standpoint. But I have, during some time, during some different particular incidences where families financially have met the challenge, or been faced with the challenge of not having funds to per se bury their loved one or what have you, the heart of mine says they have to have some type of closure. And because of emotions, because some people are just reluctant to do their part, getting them to understand that you have to hold up your end of the bargain has sometimes been difficult. And to be the guy to say, hey, the buck stops here, you got to do your part. I've had to pull that card a few times. And in pulling that card, I have to be willing to take the sacrifice and being seen as and presented as the bad guy. And when you get presented as the bad guy, your heart is right, that thing hurts. When you really can say, hey, now, I know I'm trying. And 90% of the times, it's after a second witness. I done already tried to help you one time before. You know what I mean? So when I really get to that point, it's like, no, there is absolutely no connectivity, no relationship to Slater's being an institution of yours. It means one thing to me when there's a relationship. When we are your death care provider, mama, grandmama, great granddaddy, this is where you come for that particular ministry of your life. So we're supposed to be there, regardless of finances. We're supposed to be there. We're supposed to be that institution that helps you manage that part of your life, because that's what we're called to do. So you'll sometimes have individuals who just call on you because they know you got a good heart. And they'll test you. They'll try you. And they will push you all the way to the limit. So there has been some instances, definitely within the last 2 to 3 years, where we've had, as what we call in the black race now, I had to stand on business and say, no, sir, and no, ma'am. This is what God expects for both of us. I got to do my part and handle you and take care of you, but you got to do your part and meet the need. And, so that, that type of coming togetherness has sometimes caused some friction and has sometimes been the difficult part. But even through those times, I can always go home and rest well at night knowing that I gave 100%. And 90% of the times I check with my other officers within my organization. I have an administrative assistant, funeral directors, and embalmers who help me. So we table it and I say, hey, this is, y'all help me stand on it, help me figure out what we need to do. But in those moments, they're tough. But even we're able to be triumphant in those situations because we analyze, based upon what principles of, serving our fellow man, what Christ does, and move forward. But that's it.
Can you give some advice to young entrepreneurs or people, anybody really looking to build a business, especially, rooted in their faith?
Hire someone you can't afford. I learned that term by Reverend Gilbert Dean. He's my ex-wife's grandfather. He's deceased now. But he told me one time, he said that he always wanted to see churches move forward and advance and become greater at what they did in ministry within a small town. And he said if you hire a pastor or someone who has the vision or the mindset kind of beyond where the congregation currently is or the business currently is, but definitely when you hire that person to be in that spot, they in turn, I feel as though, should be able to catapult your business forward. They should be able to take it to the next level because that's what you're investing in. Habakkuk 2:2 says, write the vision and make it plain. You got to know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, it's hard to ask somebody to join your team, to expect people to perform. Those things aren't, if you don't have that in place, you really don't know where you're going. And so when you ask the person to come join the team that you can't afford, you You set yourself up for failure when you don't have it plain. But having the vision, write it plain, having a person or, whomever, a board, that helps you to think beyond where you currently are, that helps you do it. That helps you fulfill the mission and the vision. One thing that I did not do very early on, but I do it now, I also, from a financial aspect, even when I start businesses, and this is since I've owned Slater's, other businesses that I have and I operate, I have financial experts that are at the end that begin the journey with me. I tell them, hey, Mrs. Yakitia Barnes is a local Milledgeville person who owns Fresh Start, and she helps me with one particular business from its inception. Hey, this is where we want this business to grow, but you know where it is financially now. Your consulting work, your financial advisorship, all of that is based upon where you see the inception of this business. But as this business grows, one of the major things that needs to always be a part of it is having experts in the financial field help you with your books. That you keep very tight books, you understand what your profits are, don't do anything outside of what the vision is, what you should be doing from a profitability standpoint, and have your taxes and everything paid timely, on time, so that there's no reason that you can ever say that you didn't give it your 100. When the business really fails, you can justify why it fails. I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. But if you don't ever have your stuff straight, from the vision being written down, from the financial planning being in place, from the principles of what you stand on, it's destined to fail. Because you don't ultimately have a true roadmap and you don't incorporate those experts around you in order to make sure that your platform grows. Organizations and businesses. I always say that ones who have a well put together board, they are always going to fare better. And one thing that I said this in a group a few days ago, and then hopefully they hear my heart, and I know that my heart is right, and it'll be somebody to hear it right down the road. But I am no longer appointing, voting for, or befriending people simply because of race, friendships. That's done. I love my people, and I will always go home to what the Lord, He blessed me to be born as an African American male. I love my people. I will always celebrate its culture. I'm proud black and always gonna be black. And I own that moment every time I sit at any table that the Lord allows me to sit at. I'm gonna represent us because that's what He's called me to do. But what I also realize is that someone who can bring me the best, who can become my best asset in this particular task, and whatever that task is, may not look like me. They may not be my friend. But their level of expertise in that particular subject matter can help move me to the next level. And boards, organizations, commissions, city councils, mayoralships, commission chairmen, presidents, wherever we fit in that platform, we have been guilty of picking people because they're black, picking people because they're white, picking people because they're your friend. But at the end of the day, I asked a friend of mine the other day, we were talking about it, I said we could have a competition right now within the 5 or 6 school districts, that we see right here at hand in Middle Georgia. And we had to have one person to debate how good your school system is. Who would you choose? And I gave out of 2 people. I named the 2 people. One of them was a friend of mine, super close friend, and the other person was not a friend of mine. But boy, has he exemplified a behavior that shows that he loves our school system. And he's an educator, he's on fire. But he ain't my friend. So who should be representing us in that arena? You have to choose someone who's not your friend, may not look like you. And if you really, really want to win, you got to go outside of what the norm looks like. You got to go to the next level. And sometimes it doesn't look like you, doesn't sound like you. But as long as their motive is pure, you should be able to ride with anybody who can help take you to the next level. And I think partnerships in business early on, writing the vision, making it plain, and having somebody at the root of their finances is very key. But definitely establishing boards, having the right people at the table as you brainstorm to move forward in business, I think is what will help a lot of businesses go to the next level.
Well, we truly thank you for your time and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Are there any words, or thoughts, or words of encouragement that you would like to give the audience?
I would like to say to this audience, just as who I am as a person, I was born Harrison born in Harrison, Georgia, as a country boy. I mean, just fed hogs with my granddaddy. You name it. That's who I was. Parents divorced. Didn't have a beautiful story. My parents divorced. We had to move to the projects. And my mother understood what projects were. They were temporary places that you live until you get on your feet. And when you can do better, my mother then rented a spot that was in a little bit rural area until she could then finally buy a spot that she could give and make our home. But my story is very humble, and I always tell people I come from 210 West Church Street, Temple, Georgia, the heart of the projects. And through parents who love me, they sacrificed to make sure that I had the best. Georgia 4-H was a major outlet that I had. It taught me so much. But the number one thing that has been my driving force, man, and I'll tell anybody, my grandfather, J.B. Jenkins, was a deacon for real. He understood that getting to know Jesus Christ on a personal level will be the best thing you'll ever do in your life. So when you get to know who Jesus is and you communicate with him every day, he ain't failed me yet. So I keep trusting that fella. And it has made me the man that I am today. It ain't perfect, but it has made me the man that I am today. And I'm so thankful for every opportunity that God has given, every door that he has opened. I give all glory and honor to him. That's who I am. That's how I got here. And if I can ever help my fellow man, I mean, I have a record of showing that's who I am, and that's me. That's Andre. Thank you so much for having me on the show as well.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we appreciate the work that you do in this community, in the surrounding counties as well.
It's an honor. It's an absolute honor. Honor to serve.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for watching G-Talk with Minister Coates. See you again next Sunday, 7 p.m.
Thank you so much, Minister Coates. I really appreciate that, sir.